Do you want to look perfect or be perfect?
My whole life, I'm looking for that ability to renegotiate with myself and bend a rule and justify it. That was exactly what happened Wednesday, because I didn't get a workout in. And because I didn't get a workout in, I didn't want to show up and feel the discomfort of fessing up to that in the moment. And so I avoided that discomfort. And that was the snowballing, right?
I think that perfectionism is a way to hide. I don't want anyone to see the seams or the cracks or the reality.
I could have easily showed up, said what I was able to do, owned what I didn't.
Skip perfectionism, be wholehearted, present forward, and then in retrospect, look back and say, how'd I do? Did it work? Am I getting better? What if I could go better still?
So what I learned from that is non-perfection does not mean failure. And for some reason, I always relate those two. I'm not perfect and I failed. So I've actually loved, in a weird way, the experience of failing, making that connection, fessing up to it here, and then of course the shared contribution for the community of how to do that differently next time.
It's not about perfect. It's about wholehearted. It's about bringing your whole self, body, mind, and spirit to whatever you're in the midst of and giving your all to it in the full awareness that it might not work, that it might break, that you might fail, you might look like a fool. All those things are possibilities, and you do it anyways. This is an opportunity. This is not an obligation. Eat your own humble pie and tell a better story, a more true story, a story that's as true or more true than the first one you told. And see if you don't find yourself moving closer in the direction of wholehearted. As humans, we prefer the path of least resistance. We crave convenience, the payoff without the price. But when our lives revolve around comfort, it doesn't deliver. Living in perpetual comfort leaves us weak and asleep. This podcast is an invitation to flip that script, to choose the unlikely path, to get the life you really want through voluntary discomfort. This is Strong and Awake. I'm Dane Sanders.
So one of the things that strikes me about perfectionism, and specifically about how Steve, who's a member of our community and shared that clip that you guys just heard, is that perfectionism is a thief. It steals growth from us. Not just on the front end when we're aiming for perfection, so we don't even attempt that thing because we know we're not going to be perfect at it. Or if we do it, but we don't do it perfectly and we stumble, we don't actually learn from the action either. It's stealing the benefit that comes from the actual action, whether we do it or not. Perfectionism can be this thing that is celebrated in our culture, yet oftentimes it's the very thing that's actually stealing a lot of the growth or preventing the growth that lays in front of us as opportunity. So I'd love to explore this in this episode because I think perfectionism is one of those things that a lot of us have navigated and had to think about, whether that's related to work, whether that's related to how we show up in our relationships or how we're relating with ourselves. So with enough preamble, Dane, I want to get to the meat of it.
Well, let me just say up front, so if the topic today is perfectionism, I get why there's a lot of confusion here. It really makes sense to me. So any struggling perfectionists, my invitation for you is to not, to your point, Mitch, not subtly in your heart of hearts say to yourself, this is awesome that I'm a perfectionist and I'm just struggling, whatever the hell that means. Let's open up your perfectionism bag and let's really start pulling the contents out and try to make sure we're clear on what it means and why we think it's not resourceful, that there's something that's a better resource, a different way of relating that could be helpful. But again, a nod to why it's confusing. We see examples in popular culture that are as close to perfect as we can imagine. So, it doesn't take long on Instagram to see perfect bodies doing perfect things that are impossible. How are they doing these things? I was with an old-time Man of Discomfort friend of ours, Gregory, just a day or so ago, as speaking at a conference, and we did an early morning workout. It was a great time. And Gregory Benedict, if you haven't seen his TEDx, go see it. But Gregory and I were chatting, and I was saying, yeah, have you seen that Instagram of the guy who does the Turkish getup with a barbell with, I think it's like 245 or 265 pounds. So he has like, if you don't know what a Turkish get up is, normally it's done with a kettlebell. So you have total control over the entire weight the entire time. But this guy does it with a barbell. And most people who are crazy strong can bench press with two arms, maybe that much weight. But that's really uncommon. Most people can't get above 225 if they really commit to lifting. And he's at 265. He's doing it with one arm from the ground, pushing the bar up above his chest, getting up onto one knee, getting up onto both feet, standing up, and then going down on one knee, going down to his booty, and then bringing it down controlled to his chest and putting the bar down. It's a world record. Anyway, so Gregory was actually helping the guy set the world record. He happened to be, I think, in the room getting him all sorted. And it's real. It's not like some deep fake, whatever. And you look at that and you're like, that isn't just perfect. That's like superhuman. That's just outrageous. Or again, I talk about Steph Curry all the time. I'm such a fan of his. Like when Steph Curry takes a shot, he's the greatest of all time at shooting. Of course we go, that's perfect. Like how could anyone say that's not awesome? It is awesome. And if you asked that weightlifter or that basketball player if they're perfect, what they'll tell you is they're not. What they'll tell you is all the shots they miss. But what gets celebrated is the one perfect execution. And in that regard, we do want to be perfect. But there's a difference between being perfect, like actually having a thing that happened that you did that was as close to faultless as you could imagine. But that's something that you're assessing after the fact. Perfect happened or didn't happen. It's binary. And it's come and gone. Perfectionism is an expectation that this present and moving forward, it's not worth doing unless I can do it perfect. That's the problem. And when people get that mixed up, it's like they've gotten their timeline screwed up. What they end up doing is they set this ridiculous expectation, and even worse, they become their own worst enemy. They become that thief you're describing, where they become complicit in not even trying to be excellent. And instead, they discount and go, well, if I can't be excellent, why bother? If I can't be that guy on the internet or that woman on the internet or that whatever, why bother? And what we want to say is because your life depends on it. That's why you should bother. Your physical life, your emotional life, your spiritual life. And perfectionism is what you want to reject. Being awesome, if you want to call that being perfect, have at it. But like being awesome, try to be awesome. Awesome is awesome. It's worth trying to become. And the road to get there, though, is a different word. It's not about perfect. It's about wholehearted. It's about bringing your whole self, body, mind, and spirit to whatever you're in the midst of and giving your all to it in the full awareness that it might not work, that it might break, that you might fail, you might look like a fool. All those things are possibilities, and you do it anyways. You do it with a smile on your face, knowing that if my whole heart's in it, this is an opportunity. This is not an obligation. And the reason we know this factually is because if that got taken away, if you're a basketball player and all of a sudden you lost both your hands, you don't get to shoot anymore, or you're a weightlifter and you become a paraplegic, guess what's going to happen? You're going to spend the rest of your life wishing you could have had a chance to do one more imperfect weightlift or one more imperfect shot that you missed, because that would be the greatest of all, because you give your whole self to it. In fact, people say I'd give my left limb to have another chance to do X, Y, or Z. When I tore my Achilles many years ago, that was my lament, and it led to a whole different way of living. And I want to suggest that wholeheartedness, you don't have to wait for these things to be taken from us for us to become wholehearted. We can be proactively wholehearted. And that's what present forward is all about. Skip perfectionism, be wholehearted, present forward. And then in retrospect, look back and say, how'd I do? Did it work? Am I getting better? What if I could go better still?
It's not a strong and awake episode unless we talk about Steph Curry Or pickleball.
It's
No,
true.
but it's so true. We see, and I think even in like a less, because I think part of that is obvious to people. Like, of course I can't be Steph Curry, but I'll still shoot the basketball around, or I can't be a Tiger Woods, but I'll still play golf, like, scratch golf or something.
Right.
And I think the pervasive things that you're getting at too, I think that's more common, at least in my life, is this: I'm not even going to attempt this. I'm not. It's like what Carol Dweck talks about in mindset, like. I can't do this well, or I can't do it perfectly, or I can't feel confident when doing this. So I'm going to not just not do it, but I'm going to feel justified in not doing it.
That's the cancer. That's the worst part.
Oh, it's so pervasive. And I think the reason I want to dwell on this is because it's kind of hard to clock it, because we're so accustomed to using this to let ourselves off the hook. And it feels a very like authentic, very genuine, like, well, I just feel like I can't really authentically fully presently show up. So like, I'm just not going to commit to that in this season.
They're misallocated words, because they're saying
Right.
perfectionism. I can't do this with a perfectionist attitude, so therefore I don't want to do it. The classic example, you and I were chatting about this before, are the well-intentioned people who are finding their life to be difficult. And they come to us in MWOD and they say, my life is really difficult. I can't do this wholeheartedly. Therefore, I need to quit. And to which we say, great, you're going to quit. It's probably not for you. I get it. What are you going to do instead to fortify your life so that you can actually do all these hard things? Because the hard things aren't going away. Like they're sticking around. They're here. And if your life is complicated, you actually need community more. You need structure more. You should probably add it to your practice right now, not take away. And what you're calling wholehearted isn't wholehearted. In that regard, we would rather have you bring it as much as you can bear to the table, as imperfect as that is, as you want to call it half-hearted, call it half-hearted. But here's what we know. That result will get you more in retrospect. When you look back at the result, you're going to be more satisfied with that than having not done the thing. And what you're really craving is when you say that, it's the same complaint I have about when people talk about balance. Like, I just need more balance in my life, which is really, I just need more relief in my life. So I'm going to justify breaking my commitments. That we want to say, well, there's other options besides breaking your commitments. And you can bring more of yourself to the equation. But let's not create more confusion by mixing up our words, by calling our perfectionism wholehearted, or somehow justifying that it's okay for me. I feel good about breaking a commitment to myself. When who made the commitment to who? It's you to you. So you're betraying you. You're robbing you when you break a commitment. And it's so unnecessary, because there's ways to actually modify a commitment to yourself, honor a commitment to yourself, or even just do the hard thing. Put your head down, get the thing done, and see if you don't grow because you did that thing in that moment, particularly when it was hard.
There's a number of things that we have kind of as a part of our community that we practice regularly. We have a very like request culture. Like if you've put yourself on the hook to do something and you find yourself in a situation where you can't follow through on that, it's like, make a request. We have Fess Up Fridays where we kind of get to articulate with honesty, like where we missed the mark, but not just leave it at that or let ourselves off the hook for that, but actually move from an intention or a plan, but like to actually course correct and say, this is what I'm going to be doing differently, and honoring that and moving forward and not dwelling in shame. And I think obviously the reasons we do these things isn't just because we're like, we want power and we want to have people make requests of us or confess to us. It's like such a resourceful practice to exercise these things, to change how we're relating with missing the mark or making requests. And I think that's been one of the biggest reveals for me, is like realizing how uncomfortable I have historically been with those practices. So again, without speaking specifically to, like, I'm not prescribing that people practice these things. I mean, I think it's super resourceful and we'd love to have you in the community. But like, what can people be doing in their day-to-day as these things start to come up? Like, what are some of the first steps to begin to identify when they are living in this perfectionism or maybe guise perfectionism, and how do they kind of course correct and start to move forward out of that?
Yeah. So let's make one more comment about what perfectionism often is. And that is, it's a means by which I can look a certain kind of way. It's almost like a virtue signaling. Like, I want people to see me as a hard worker, see me as, gosh, I'm burning the candle at both ends, and I'm really locked in and committed. But what's revealed in a moment like that is like, and you're also incredibly undisciplined about setting boundaries and overcommitting. And why are you doing that? Well, it probably feeds a narrative about you that you like, and you want to have it all, right? And the irony is, you're disqualifying yourself from having it all because you didn't measure and assess your capacity and ratchet up according to your growth and your ability. So this again, thinly veiled effort to be perceived a certain kind of way is a way to hide. And I think that perfectionism is a way to hide, actually, because what you're like, I don't want anyone to see the seams or the cracks or the reality. And you get in our culture like why that's so reinforced, right? This is a long noticed phenomenon where if what is communicated has been edited to the degree of we've hidden all of the fractures, the goal is to make it look as perfect as possible. But making it look perfect and being perfect are very different things. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, and then I want to get to your question because I don't think I'm addressing it. But go ahead.
Hold that, because I think what you were just saying is super important. But I also think it's not just for the outside world. It's for ourselves too. I don't like seeing myself as fragile or imperfect.
No, I actually think it's primarily about me.
Totally. Like, it's not
the outside world doesn't even care. The outside world doesn't even care.
100%.
Yeah. It's like me trying to get my hair just right when nobody noticed my hair.
When they're just listening to the podcast and can't see you anyway.
I know, and the amount of time and product that I've put into this effort, like the amount of I get so mad at myself when I think about like, what am I going to wear? Like, why do no one cares about what I'm going to wear but me. No human being. And yet, you can have that sense of like, if people acknowledge it when you walk into a room, there's a sense of like status, or am I wearing a certain kind of thing, or, whatever. And status is real. I get that. And maybe these efforts at Vanity can help, but perfectionism is a kind of vanity that I just want to call it for what it is. And the irony is, nobody likes vain people. Like, we just don't like it. I'm not liked when I'm vain. I know that factually. What I am appreciated for is when people see me try, like really give my all to it, especially in total, utter failure. But I also want to add too, we're talking about like we're request culture and we have Fess Up Fridays and how important those things are. They're great mechanisms for when we are not hitting the mark. But there is another alternative that we don't talk enough about, which is hitting the mark. Like, do the thing. Keep your word. Mm-hmm. And it's not a question of whether you'll do that 100% of the time. We already know that's not going to happen. But it's really okay if you do. Some of the time, actually do what you say you're going to do. And I would argue when you do, it is really helpful to you and to those you're around in a way that is I think we give so much attention to how do we get out of our commitments. I think sometimes we forget that the easiest way to get out of a commitment is to keep your commitment, because then it'll be historic and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And be really clear about what you're committed to, who you're committed to be, and have your actions and projects that you can put yourself on the hook for reflect those things.
Mm-hmm. That's so important, because I think there is an emphasis that I make, I know, but I'm sure a lot of us make, that, you learn from your failures, and then we kind of steer the whole conversation to growth only happens in failure, or like flourishing only happens in failure. It's like, okay, that's part of the equation. But if I like, it's really impactful when I apologize to my kids. Like if I like, raise my voice or do something, inappropriate that hurt their feelings or something, it's really impactful for me to apologize. But if like that is only the only indication of me being a good parent and not like all of the times when I do the right thing, when I control my temper or whatever, like then that's like an incomplete story. So I think that is really important to point out. So thank you for doing that.
And to even say like, it may not be flashy, but in those moments where you didn't blow up or you didn't whatever, fill in the blank, whatever listeners have their particular triggers and responses that they regret later. Over time, all those times when you do show up in a measured way, when you do keep your word, when you are the kind of person that you believe you can be consistently, it's not going to be celebrated every time, but it's what you become. It's your character. It's what you become famous for. It's the stuff that people depend on. And that is a worthy investment. Like that pays exponentially more than asking for forgiveness. You're not going to get kind of insta status for it.
Right.
And it's amazing because when you start making those deposits day in, day out and become a certain kind of person that might be taken for granted, but even being taken for granted often is a sign that you are the kind of person who keeps granting things, like that you keep giving things. And who doesn't want to be that person? Well, everyone wants to be that person, but very few want to do the work to become that person, which is doing all of the efforts, the wholeheartedness as we move increasingly, hopefully, toward who we think we are.
So I originally was steering this conversation towards like, how do I identify like when this dynamic is at play, when perfectionism is cropping up? And I'm totally down to keep talking about that, but I have a hunch that like a lot of people know when that's going on. Maybe not.
Well, it's a good question. It's funny when I think about, friends I cited earlier, like in our community who are like, hey, I can't be a part of this because I can't be wholehearted. And they're misunderstanding kind of who we are and what we're about.
Yeah. Guilty.
Most people, when we reveal it, we're like, oh, no, you don't. I think you're missing. You're forgetting maybe for a second. And then we remind you and people get sorted and it's great. And by the way, most of those people don't actually end up leaving. That's what's so cool is when they kind of calibrate. They go, oh yeah, I do see that. Oh yeah, I do need community. I do need to be on the hook for a foundation that I can do this complicated life from, and so on. So I think there is probably some value in like the stuff that you want to look for to make sure you're not deceiving yourself. I would say would be things like, are you seeing yourself as a victim to circumstances in your life? That would be a tell. Because if you have a perfectionist perspective that's the standard, then when everything is kind of feels like a truck is on top of you and it's just getting loaded, and you have this vision in your head of like, this shouldn't be so. I think that, and why am I being so oppressed kind of thing? And I need to take action, but the taking of action is actually removing my responsibilities as opposed to either keeping them or making a request, or if I miss the mark, making amends. They're all at your disposal, and shifting your perspective from one of it's all happening to me to I actually have agency in this moment would be shrewd. So if you just find yourself complaining, if you find yourself it's always happening to me, I think those are good tells. And it's weird to talk about victim relative to perfectionism, but I think there really is there's some kind of a relationship in there that's worth paying attention to.
Yeah. Well, oftentimes it's a justification.
Yeah.
For like, and this is why I can't be perfect.
Well, and I think, and that's right. That's the second piece I would argue is just notice if you're telling a really grand story as to why you're missing the mark on things. The stories reveal what we're avoiding. And what if there was a simpler story to the situation at hand? You just don't want to do it. It's hard. You're tired. You're grumpy. You didn't eat. You didn't sleep. You didn't have enough water yesterday. You happen to have a really challenging job, and you haven't been a good steward of your energy, and now the job is even more challenging. That kind of thing. And the common denominator in all of these notice things is humility. It's a willingness to kind of go, oh, okay, I'm going to wake up and eat humble pie before I get handed humble pie. I'd rather be humble than be humiliated. That is an exercise. That's a discipline. That's a practice. In a world where maybe people are flexing more often than not and trying to present like they are perfect, you can see why that would be, we may not be interested in that. We might not feel aligned with, we want to look perfect. So therefore, like even the question, do you want to look perfect or be perfect? If you find yourself, you want to look perfect because being perfect would make you look imperfect. Because being perfect is messy, man. Like hitting every shot, messy. You got to fight for that. And I think it's a good tell for me. If I'm not willing to get my, sorted, like
You just messed up his hair for your audio listeners.
Yeah, if you didn't see, and it still looked good. That's what's so crazy. But you guys get my point, and we can move on, because I think it's critical that we start thinking through. Okay, if once you've noticed, what do you do about it? And I think it's, number one, I think very helpful to be in community with people who can help you discern or help you kind of see reality a little bit more clearly. I think.
Well, and even just holding account, like the very act of holding account, you start to hear yourself. Like, I can't tell you how many volleys or videos that I've recorded in our community where I'm talking about something and I'm hear myself saying all of these justifications and excuses, and my family's been sick and this, which, like, I know, I'm like, oh my goodness, I am just justifying to preserve some kind of, or to feel that much more celebrated because I still did this thing.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't need to hear any responses, but just hearing myself record this thing, I'm like, ooh, what am I doing?
For those who don't know this, in our community, we don't hold anyone accountable. We invite people to account. So what Mitch is describing is like, because the reason we ask everyone to check in every single day is to do exactly what Mitch is describing. You get to indict yourself. And if you didn't hear yourself very well, we have a community of people who will help you hear exactly what you just said. Yes. And it's amazing. But it is humble pie, man. It's humble pie. Can I have some more, please? Yummy, yummy.
Totally. Okay, so we've got community. You said that's really resourceful. What else?
I think that every 3 months or so, about every 90 days or so, it's just, or maybe leading up to like a quarterly change or whatever, just like we would do in business and come up with like quarterly goals or KPIs or whatever. It's probably worth pausing and just assessing your life. Like, put it in the calendar, ask yourself the question, am I trying to present an image or be the real thing, be the real McCoy? And then the follow-up question would be, what would the next 90 days look like? How would I want to engineer or design my next 90 days to move further from trying to appear perfect and closer to being the real deal? And what'll happen for a lot of folks is they start assessing their projects if they're smart. Now, in our community, the temptation is to assess your practice and start like, oh, I need to stop doing cold showers and holding my breath and working out. And what do I need to drink water or stretch or why, and so on, or eat clean, and that's just foundation stuff. Like, don't mess with that stuff. That's how you actually stand up in life, period. But you might start assessing the projects in your life and going, are these actually as important as they used to be? Are these critical in the season that I'm in relative to the bigger ambitions I have for who I want to become this year or next decade? And as that happens, I think that's where the boundary setting begins to happen. You start clarifying what really is important in this season. So I can be not only wholehearted with my practice, the foundation, but I can be wholehearted in the people, the projects, and the season of life that I'm in.
Obviously, I have found our community to be very resourceful in helping me, like, just be honest with myself, eat that humble pie, and also like learn from doing the thing. So besides going into the, description, applying to MWOD, like what are a couple things that like today, because yes, quarterly, it's great, but like what are some practical takeaways to kind of close out this episode that people can begin to do? Like,
I love that question. So bring it down to the last 24 hours. In the last 24 hours, where did you make up a story that got you out of a commitment? Just name that thing. And who did you tell that story to? And what would it look like for you to go back to that same person and tell them a new story? Say, hey, remember that story I told you about why I broke the commitment here? I didn't do the thing there. I didn't do whatever. Eat your own humble pie and tell a better story, a more true story, a story that's as true or more true than the first one you told. And see if you don't find yourself moving closer in the direction of wholehearted in that conversation, in that one space. At the end of the day, it's still a matter of taking atomic level parts of real conversations, real projects, real tasks, real doing, and align those with our commitments. Doing things when we don't want to do them, hugging the cactus, putting ourselves in the hook in the first place. And because we live in a world where it's really easy to do we talk about credo all the time, but committing to things really quickly, that's great. Commit to all the things you'd like. But in the last 24 hours, where did you notice like, oh, because I wasn't very judicious in those choices in those 90-day window kind of quarterly decisions, and now I'm on the hook for all these things, man, when it comes to my projects, it might be time for me to do some renegotiating because I'm spending so much energy trying to maintain it all and keep all the plates spinning and all the, balls in the metaphorical air. What's happening is I'm robbing myself, betraying myself, and not showing up wholehearted in any place because I want to maintain appearances of perfect in all these places. And it's powerful. It often isn't solved in one moment, but it usually begins in one moment. And in those beginnings, it usually comes from a story. Where did you tell yourself a story that kind of propped up this perfectionist mindset? And how might you trade that in for one that's closer to wholehearted?
We have strong and awake for love's sake. And this is where that love for love's sake comes in a really powerful way, because I see you model this all the time. It's you doing that with me even before this call, processing raw. What are you navigating? How am I relating with you? Like all these things, like is an invitation for others to step into that too. It was an invitation for me to also be honest. So I appreciate you for that, Dane. You're a good friend and a good mentor, and hopefully our listeners are also experiencing us in that way.
Yeah, you're encouraging, Mitch. I'm really glad that you brought up the for love's sake part, because that's the whole point. That's the whole point. It's the impact. And just like when you're describing with your kids how powerful it is when you're willing to apologize, when you're willing to, like, when we do course correct, or when we do the thing, all these things are building blocks that aren't just about me. Me is just boring after a while. But me for the sake of others, for the other, especially for those who are without or not included or counted out, that's the magic, man. And it's just rare to become the kinds of people who can actually make an impact in those spaces without some of this kind of work. So that's really what's at stake here. It's less about optimization and more about for love's sake. And if you want to be the kind of person who can do that kind of work, do this kind of work and see if you don't find yourself a lot more satisfied with the result.
Thanks, Dane.
Thanks, Mitch. Men and Women of Discomfort is our membership community, and we are open to everyone. But keep in mind, our tagline is, "It's probably not for you." If we're wrong about that, or if you want to find out for yourself, you can find us at MWOD.io.